afraid of the dark.
Halloween had lost its youthful allure for me, now at 32 years old. The excitement of my childhood had faded, and my Halloween nights were spent in a more subdued manner. I would adorn my home with festive decorations and eagerly await the arrival of trick-or-treaters, a candy bowl at the ready. This particular story took place in 2022, and I began my day with a sense of anticipation, tidying my house, and making the trip to the store to ensure I had enough treats for the evening's festivities. As the afternoon sun began its descent, I left my door slightly ajar, a subtle invitation to any costumed visitors. Our neighborhood, though not bustling with activity, had a different vibe this year. I waited, eager to see the creative costumes and hand out candy. But as the minutes ticked by, the street remained eerily quiet. 2 hours passed without a single ghost or goblin gracing my doorstep. I remained hopeful, standing by the door, ready to greet any latecomers. Finally, at 6:30, the stillness was broken by the sound of my doorbell. I sprang into action, eager to see who had arrived. As I approached the door, I noticed a figure standing outside, their gaze fixed on my house. They were dressed in an intriguing costume, featuring a white mask that concealed their identity, revealing only a pair of mysterious eyes. I found it odd that they were peering into my home, despite the slightly open door. Nonetheless, I approached them, offering the candy bowl with a generous gesture. As they reached for a treat, I realized they were alone, and something about their demeanor seemed peculiar. They stood taller than the average child, and upon closer inspection, their eyes betrayed their age. The whites of their eyes were tinged with redness, and faint dark circles hinted at fatigue or something more sinister. Unsure of their true nature, I decided against confronting them, not wanting to cause embarrassment. Perhaps they were just an older child, I thought. After they departed, I returned to my movie, trying to shake off the strange encounter. However, my peace was short-lived. Approximately 15 minutes later, I was startled by the sound of footsteps right outside my front door. Expecting another trick-or-treater, I turned around, only to find my heart racing at the sight before me. The same figure from earlier, donning the eerie white mask, was now standing inside my house, mere inches from my front door. "Can I help you?" I managed to utter, my voice laced with surprise and concern. The figure fixed me with an intense stare, as if weighing their next move. After a tense moment, they backed away and exited the house, leaving me in a state of shock. I cautiously approached the front door, peering out to see them walking down my driveway, repeatedly glancing back as if to ensure I wasn't following. This behavior was bizarre and unsettling. Why had they entered my home, and why did they return? My mind raced with questions. Convinced that this couldn't be the innocent act of a child, I grew increasingly uneasy. It seemed more likely that a disturbed individual, disguised in a costume, had sinister intentions. Feeling unsafe and concerned for the neighborhood children, I reached for my phone to alert the police. As I made the call, my heart pounded in my chest. Before long, I heard footsteps approaching my door again, but this time there was no doorbell or knock. I crept towards the door, peering through the peephole to identify the visitor. As if sensing my presence, a voice called out, "Hello? I'm looking for my kid. Have you seen them?" To my surprise, a middle-aged man, seemingly in his 40s, stood there, dressed casually in a brown long-sleeve shirt and blue jeans. Something about this didn't sit right with me. As he leaned closer to the door, I noticed the same dark circles and bloodshot eyes I had seen on the masked figure earlier. My blood ran cold, and I retreated, my face drained of color. I continued the call with the police in the other room, my voice trembling and my heart racing. After a few minutes, I cautiously returned to the front door, only to find the man had vanished. The police arrived shortly after, and we discovered a discarded white mask and costume hidden in the bushes on my property, hastily abandoned. It was clear that this man had been masquerading as someone else, his intentions far from innocent. The police launched a search, but unfortunately they couldn't locate him that night. I could only hope that whatever disturbing plan he had concocted had been thwarted by my vigilance and the swift response of the authorities. His strange behavior, appearing at my door 3 times and pretending to be a concerned parent, left no doubt that his intentions were far from benign. It was Halloween, and I vividly recall being in 8th grade, a pivotal time when my friends and I felt the pangs of growing up. We had reached the crossroads where trick-or-treating, a cherished tradition for the past decade, suddenly seemed too juvenile. This year marked the first time we would forgo the customary candy hunt, leaving us with a void of uncertainty. With no alternative plans, most of my friends resigned themselves to a low-key evening at home, perhaps handing out treats to younger kids. However, my best friend Tyler and I were determined to make this Halloween memorable. We craved adventure, eager to embark on any thrilling endeavor. I made my way to Tyler's place, and together, we concocted a plan to explore a mysterious location he had heard whispers about. It was said to be an abandoned tunnel or an underground mine, hidden in the woods just a few miles south of our town. I had vaguely heard tales of this place, but neither of us knew the full story. Tyler managed to obtain directions from a friend, and with our plans set, we hopped on our bikes, ready for an adventure. The streets were alive with Halloween revelers, but cars were scarce. As we ventured closer to the woods, the houses thinned out, and the crowds diminished. We expected other kids to have the same idea, but the lack of fellow explorers only heightened our excitement. We secured our bikes to a nearby tree and embarked on our journey. A small footpath, likely forged by previous adventurers, led the way. It was muddy, overgrown, and easy to lose track of, forcing us to backtrack several times. The darkness enveloped us, and Tyler's single flashlight, the only source of light, guided our path. We trudged through the wilderness for approximately 40 minutes until we reached a clearing in the trees. On the other side of this clearing lay the entrance to the tunnel, a small hole in the side of a hill, beckoning us with its mysterious darkness. We were now certain it was an old mine. Tyler, with me close behind, approached the opening, his flashlight illuminating the way. The tunnel was eerie, extremely dusty, and rugged, with rock walls that seemed to stretch endlessly. Before entering, I instinctively glanced back at the woods, and my heart skipped a beat. I thought I saw something move near one of the trees along the path. I urged Tyler to shine his light in that direction, but our search revealed nothing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, but Tyler's presence offered a sense of reassurance. As we stepped into the tunnel, dust particles danced in the beam of light. The silence was profound, and our footsteps echoed eerily, making the tunnel feel like an endless abyss. Our exploration was abruptly interrupted by a sound ahead of us, a faint voice whispering. The echo carried the sound, allowing us to hear it clearly. Tyler held the flashlight steady, but the darkness beyond was impenetrable. In a moment of unspoken understanding, we both pivoted and began retracing our steps, a sense of unease growing with each step. As we retreated, the voices behind us seemed to grow louder, either from increased volume or because they were drawing closer. I glanced back repeatedly, but the darkness remained impenetrable, even just a few feet away. Finally reaching the entrance, we stopped abruptly, our hearts pounding. Standing a mere 10 yards away was an unknown man, casually walking towards the tunnel's opening. Without hesitation, we bolted for the trees, fear propelling us forward. I dared not turn around, too afraid to confirm if he was chasing us. Eventually, our sprint turned into a breathless jog as we made our way back towards town. As we walked, we pieced together the unsettling events. We surmised that the man we saw outside the tunnel had sinister intentions, perhaps planning to trap us inside or block our escape. Why else would an adult be alone in the woods on Halloween night? exploring a place known to attract curious kids. The voices inside the mine remained a mystery. They could have been other kids or accomplices of the man in the woods. But we felt incredibly fortunate to have turned back when we did. Had we lingered just 10 seconds longer, the man could have reached the entrance, sealing our fate. He could have blocked our only exit, forcing us deeper into the tunnel with no way out. This close call left us shaken but grateful for our quick thinking and the bond of friendship that gave us the courage to face the unknown. It was late October, and I was a sophomore at university, sharing a dorm room with a girl named Kylie. She was a great roommate, though we weren't particularly close, as I tended to keep to myself while she embraced a more social lifestyle. Halloween weekend arrived, and to my surprise, Kylie invited me to a party at a friend's house. She insisted I'd have fun, meet new people, and escape the confines of our dorm room. Initially, I declined, but her persistence won me over. I hastily threw together a ghost costume from Spirit Halloween, and at 8 p.m., Kylie ordered an Uber to her friend's place. The house was about a 10-minute drive from campus, but in a small town like ours, it felt like a different world. It was located on an empty road, a solitary large house adorned with orange lights and inflatable Halloween decorations. As we entered, I was relieved to find it wasn't overly crowded, with only about 10 to 15 people our age. We drank and played games for hours, and I was glad I had come. By 1 a.m., however, I was exhausted and ready to leave. I found Kylie, but she was too drunk to go, planning to spend the night. I didn't know the others well enough to ask for a ride, especially since they were also intoxicated, mostly guys. I stepped outside, contemplating my options. I considered Uber, but the $30 fare for a 10-minute ride seemed excessive, and I doubted I had enough money in my account. Tipsy and a bit reckless, I decided to walk back to campus, estimating a 35 to 40-minute journey. I set off, leaving the bright lights of the party behind, and soon found myself on a dark, eerie stretch of road. The streetlights were few and far between, offering brief moments of illumination before plunging me back into darkness. As I walked, I noticed a car behind me, parked on the side of the road. Every few minutes I'd glance back and the car had moved closer, as if following me. I tried to keep an eye on it, but at one point it disappeared into the fog. I continued walking, unnerved by the feeling of being watched. After about 5 minutes, I heard a car engine behind me. I turned to see a car emerging from the fog, its headlights off, slowing down beside me. A man with a scraggly beard and an unsettling smile asked where I was headed. I replied that I was fine, but he insisted on offering me a ride, claiming it was unsafe to walk alone at night. As I started to decline, his smile vanished and his face tensed. His eyes bore into me with an aggressive intensity, as if he wasn't taking no for an answer. I stammered, unsure of what to say, and in that moment he stopped the car and flung open the door, starting to get out. Just then, another car's headlights pierced the fog, and I sprinted into the middle of the street, waving frantically. The man hastily retreated into his car as the other vehicle slowed down. It turned out to be one of the guys from the party, and he offered me a ride back to campus. I recounted the unsettling encounter, grateful for his intervention. The adrenaline had sobered me up instantly, and I couldn't help but think that if he hadn't shown up, things could have taken a much darker turn. I might have ended up missing, with no trace of what happened to me. In the quiet town of Derry, Maine, where the leaves were turning crimson and the air carried a chill, a young man named Jake found himself entangled in a Halloween tale that would haunt his dreams for years to come. Jake, a lanky and introspective soul, had always felt a peculiar connection to this time of year, when the veil between worlds grew thin and the shadows danced with malevolent glee. As the days shortened and the pumpkins ripened, Jake's thoughts turned to the macabre, his imagination fueled by the eerie silence of the town's back streets and the whispered legends of local lore. It was during this time that he stumbled upon a peculiar phenomenon, one that would set in motion a chain of events both terrifying and life-altering. One crisp October evening, Jake, driven by a restless curiosity, ventured into the heart of Derry's historic district, a place where the echoes of the past mingled with the present. Here, among the ancient oaks and weathered headstones, he discovered a house, its once grand facade now shrouded in decay and overgrown ivy. It stood like a sentinel, guarding long-forgotten secrets. Intrigued, Jake approached, his footsteps crunching through the carpet of fallen leaves. The house, with its sagging porch and broken windows, seemed to beckon him closer, its presence both inviting and foreboding. As he drew near, a chill crept up his spine, as if the very air was warning him of unseen dangers. Through a gap in the boarded-up windows, Jake glimpsed a dimly lit interior, its walls adorned with faded floral wallpaper, now peeling at the edges. A sense of profound loneliness emanated from within, as if the house itself were a living entity, yearning for companionship in its decrepitude. Jake's curiosity morphed into a compulsion, and he found himself circling the house, searching for a way in. He discovered a side door, its hinges rusted but still functional. With a creak that echoed through the empty rooms, the door swung open, inviting Jake into the heart of this mysterious abode. The interior was a time capsule, frozen in a bygone era. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced through broken shutters, and the air was heavy with the scent of aged wood and forgotten dreams. Jake's footsteps echoed on the creaking floorboards as he ventured deeper into the house, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. In the musty parlor, a grand piano stood, its ivory keys yellowed with age. Jake, drawn to it like a moth to a flame, sat and ran his fingers across the keys, producing a dissonant melody that seemed to stir the very essence of the house. As the last note faded, a faint sound, like a distant, mournful wail, echoed through the halls. Jake's curiosity turned to unease. He rose, his heart hammering in his chest, and began to explore further. The house revealed its secrets slowly, each room a tableau of a life once lived but now forgotten. In the attic, he discovered a child's bedroom, its walls adorned with faded nursery rhymes and the faint outlines of childish drawings. It was here that Jake felt a presence, as if the house were not as empty as it seemed. A chill, unrelated to the autumn breeze, brushed the nape of his neck, and he heard the faintest of whispers, too soft to discern. "Hello," Jake called out, his voice cracking in the stillness. "Is someone there?" The house responded with silence, but Jake could have sworn he heard the creak of floorboards, as if something or someone were moving through the shadows, just out of sight. His imagination, fueled by the tales of Derry's dark history, conjured images of spectral figures and malevolent entities lurking in the corners. Determined to uncover the house's secrets, Jake spent the next several days exploring its every nook and cranny. He discovered hidden compartments, forgotten diaries, and a trove of antique toys, each item a piece in a puzzle that seemed to grow more sinister with each revelation. The house, it seemed, was not merely abandoned, but had a story to tell, one that Jake was determined to uncover. As Halloween night drew near, Jake's fascination with the house deepened. He spent his evenings poring over the diaries he had found, piecing together the tragic tale of a family torn apart by grief and madness. The house, it seemed, was not just a relic of the past, but a vessel for the memories and emotions of those who had once called it home. On the eve of All Hallows' Eve, Jake decided to spend the night in the house, a decision that would test the limits of his courage and sanity. He brought with him a backpack filled with supplies, a flashlight, a journal, and a small tent, for he intended to camp out in the attic, the heart of the house's mystery. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Jake settled into the attic, the glow of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. He wrote in his journal, documenting his thoughts in the house's eerie ambience. As the night deepened, so too did the sense of unease. The house seemed to stir, its creaks and groans more pronounced. Jake, huddled in his tent, felt a presence beyond the thin fabric, as if something were watching, waiting. The air grew colder, and the faint whispers he had heard before now seemed to surround him, a chorus of spectral voices. "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice laced with fear. "Show yourself." The house responded with a cacophony of creaks and groans, as if it were laughing at his audacity. And then, in the dim light of his flashlight, Jake saw them, pale, translucent figures, their faces contorted in eternal anguish, floated towards him, their eyes burning with otherworldly rage. Jake screamed, a primal cry of terror, as the ghosts of the house's tragic past descended upon him. He scrambled from his tent, his flashlight beam cutting through the spectral forms, and raced down the creaking stairs, his heart pounding in his ears. The front door, which he had locked from the inside, now stood ajar, a silent invitation to the realm beyond. Jake burst through, his feet carrying him down the weed-choked path, away from the house and its spectral inhabitants. As he fled, the ghosts pursued, their wails echoing through the night. Jake ran until his lungs burned and his legs ached, finally collapsing on the steps of the Derry Public Library, a sanctuary of knowledge and light. Here, in the safety of the library, Jake recounted his harrowing tale to the elderly librarian, Mr. Gaunt, a man well versed in Derry's dark history. Mr. Gaunt listened, his eyes widening with each revelation. "You've stumbled upon one of Derry's oldest and most tragic tales, my boy," Mr. Gaunt said, his voice heavy with sympathy. "That house is a gateway, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blur. Those spirits you encountered are trapped, unable to find peace, and they seek to draw others into their eternal torment." Jake, shaken to his core, realized the magnitude of what he had experienced. He had not merely stumbled upon an abandoned house, but had crossed into a realm where the living and the dead coexisted, a place where the ghosts of the past sought to ensnare the innocent. As the sun rose over Derry, casting a warm glow across the town, Jake made a solemn vow. He would return to the house, armed with knowledge and courage, to lay the spirits to rest and free them from their eternal prison. For Jake understood that sometimes the only way to defeat the monsters was to face them, even if it meant staring into the heart of darkness itself. And so, on the night of Halloween, as the town celebrated with costumes and candy, Jake returned to the haunted house, a beacon of light in a sea of shadows. He carried with him the tools of exorcism, ancient texts, and sacred symbols, ready to confront the malevolent spirits that dwelled within. The house, sensing his return, seemed to stir with anticipation, its creaks and groans a sinister welcome. Jake, his heart steady with determination, entered, his footsteps echoing through the empty halls. He called out to the spirits, challenging them to show themselves, to face the power of his resolve. The house responded with a fury, the ghosts materializing in a whirlwind of spectral rage. They swirled around Jake, their wails piercing the air, but he stood firm, his faith in the power of good unwavering. With each incantation he recited, each symbol he brandished, the spirits weakened, their hold on the house beginning to falter. In a final act of defiance, the leader of the spectral horde, a woman whose grief had twisted into madness, lunged at Jake, her fingers like icy claws. But Jake, fortified by his courage and the light of his soul, pushed back, his own inner strength a force more powerful than any ghostly manifestation. The woman's form wavered, her spectral essence dissipating into the ether. With a final, mournful wail, she and her fellow spirits vanished, their tormented souls finally at peace. The house, freed from its spectral occupants, stood silent, its walls no longer echoing with the cries of the damned. Jake, exhausted but triumphant, emerged from the house, the rising sun casting long shadows behind him. He had faced the darkness, both within the house and within himself, and had emerged victorious, a testament to the power of courage and the indomitable human spirit. As Jake walked back into the welcoming arms of Eerie, the town that had borne witness to his ordeal, he knew that his Halloween tale would become legend, a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are those that dwell within us, and the greatest victories are those won against our own fears. The story is based on a diary I found in my new apartment. Whether to believe it or not, I don't know. I'm writing in the style of fiction. I'm writing from the author's perspective. It happened back in 1998 when technology was low level, and the author experienced a horrifying story that still makes me wake up in cold sweat at night. The author was an ordinary teenager, studying in 9th grade, trying to devote as much time as possible to studying on weekdays and hanging out with friends on weekends. Fortunately, his parents' work schedule allowed him to do so often. On those days, friends would gather at his apartment and watch various horror movies, war movies, love stories, and so on a VCR, if you remember. Those were in the 90s. But then came the moment when they had watched all the tapes available and needed to buy a new one. They agreed to pool money together for a tape, contributing what each could. That's where the story begins. May 11th, 1998, from the author's words.
The next day, I decided to skip school and go check out the latest movies. To my great disappointment, the store where they were sold turned out to be closed. With a heavy heart, I walked along the sidewalk, hoping to make it to the third lesson. After walking a couple of 100 meters quickly, I slowed down as I noticed something in the distance that caught my attention. I saw a kiosk that I had never seen in this area before. I approached it, and to my surprise it was a mobile trailer kiosk, and wonder of wonders, it had tapes. Well, there is justice in this world, after all, flashed through my mind. I started looking through the window with tinted glass at the available goods, but to my disappointment the selection was scarce, or rather, there was none at all. There were only 7 tapes lined up, nothing remarkable about them except the packaging. I debated for a long time whether it was worth the risk to buy one of these tapes, but in the end, I made my choice. I knocked on the kiosk window waiting for a response, but there was none, so I knocked again. A rough male voice came from the other side.
What do you want?
I would like to buy a tape from you, I replied.
What tape?
I heard a hint of sarcasm in his rough voice. Are you making fun of me, I thought. I couldn't see his face, but for some reason at that moment I imagined a picture of a fat, pimply, clumsy oaf. I wanted to leave, but curiosity got the better of me. You have 7 tapes lined up on the shelf. I wanted to finish this conversation quickly.
$25.
The voice said, now without laughter. I silently handed the money through the window, and to my surprise, all 7 tapes ended up in my hands. I headed home with a satisfied look on my face. At that time, I had no idea why I'd had it over $25 on that fateful day. On the way home, I pondered what could be on these tapes: some cheap trash, or some movie that flopped at the box office, or maybe an adult home movie. What am I thinking? After 10 minutes, I stood at the door of my apartment with a bag full of tapes. Entering the hallway, I took off my sneakers and rushed into the room where the VCR stood. Dumping the tapes on the floor, I started examining the contents of the packages. It turned out that all the tapes were numbered and called Day 1, Day 2, and so on. All except the last tape. There were no recordings on it. I took the tape labeled Day 1 and inserted it into the VCR. I turned on the TV and started watching. A simple school notebook with 12 sheets appeared on the screen. The name of the student, class number, and school number were clearly written on the notebook in neat handwriting. Then the notebook disappeared from the screen and amateur camera footage appeared. At first, the city where the filming took place was shown, the surroundings of the city, and so on. I didn't recognize the city. It was winter on the film and it was evening outside. About 5 to 6 o'clock approximately. The camera made characteristic up and down movements as usual when a person is filming while walking. Suddenly it turned towards some bushes and stopped. It seemed that the filming was now taking place in a park. The camera focused on a playground where several school-aged children were playing. The children gradually dispersed and the camera didn't take its eyes off them. Until the last child left the playground. I wanted to turn off this nonsense, but then the camera started moving again. She began to follow the last child's footsteps. And with each step, the camera drew closer and closer. There it was, already behind him. You could see a man's hand reaching towards the child's back. Suddenly the recording cut off. The next frame horrified me. I wanted to turn off the recording, burn the tapes, forget what I had seen. But I didn't. In the next frame, the same child appeared. I recognized him by his jacket. The child lay in the snow, lifeless. But the recording didn't end there. The next frame showed the same child, but now he was sitting at a table doing homework. He smiled at the camera, waved, then stood up and joyfully approached the camera. His eyes sparkled with happiness. The recording cut off again. Next, the camera showed the same child sitting at another table in a completely different place, but now he wasn't doing homework. He was dead. And his frozen face was turned towards the camera. A rough male voice could be heard off screen.
That's what happens to those who linger in the park and don't listen to their parents.
Say hi to your dad. Who drunk gave me the recording with you in the starring role that's where the first tape ends? Oh God, how awful, it tore me apart. I wanted to believe it was a montage, a setup, anything but the truth. The first thought that came to my mind was to go to the police. They had to find this scum, they had to. And then I remembered the all-too-familiar voice on the tape. I inserted the tape again, rewound it to the end, listened again. It was exactly the voice from the trailer kiosk. Panic engulfed me. Oh my God, I didn't know what to do. I was afraid for my life, because if the tape was true, then I had signed my own death warrant. $25, yes, that's now the value of my life. Think, show it to someone? But is it worth it? What if the person I show it to blabs? Then it's the end for me. Maybe the scum is already watching me. After all, he saw my face. Damn, I decided not to do anything. I hid the tapes at home in a secure place, where I usually hid cigarettes. The rest of the day went as bad as it could. I was afraid of every noise, watched what was happening outside the window. Cigarettes disappeared one after another, and when there was a knock on the door, I almost went crazy. But fortunately, it wasn't a maniac with a knife behind the door, it was my friend Andrew. He came to see how I was doing and why I hadn't come to school today. Unfortunately, I had to lie. I told him I was sick and would stay home for a couple of days. We talked for a while and I felt a little better. But when Andrew left, I felt uneasy again. I lay in bed trying unsuccessfully to fall asleep when there was a knock on the door. No, it can't be. He can't know where I live. Okay, stay calm. I'm home, so I'm safe. At least for now, I just need to ignore it. And again the knock. And again and again. My nerves couldn't take this pressure. I jumped out of bed and headed to the door. "Who's there?" I asked.
Hi, it's me. Remember we were supposed to go for a walk in the evening?
A female voice replied. I felt relieved beyond measure. With these ridiculous thoughts about the psychomaniac, I completely forgot that I had promised Emma to go for a walk on Monday. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 11. I opened the door. "Hi, Emma. Sorry for not opening earlier. I'm just sick." "Let's sit at my place instead," I said. The answer came immediately.
Okay.
Emma entered the apartment. We went to the kitchen. I put on the kettle. We started talking. Emma is a very good friend, but a terrible gossip, and she immediately puts an end to any attempts to flirt, referring to higher feelings than mere liking. In short, we drank tea and so that Emma would stay longer, I really didn't want to be alone, suggested watching a movie. To my joy, she agreed. She also didn't forget to mention that I promised to buy a new tape. I mumbled something in response, and in the end, everything ended well. We spent a long time deciding which movie to watch. Emma insisted on Evil Dead and I wanted to watch Gilmore Girls. In the end, we decided to watch the movie The Mask with Jim Carrey in the lead role. During the movie, I tried to touch Emma's knee, for which I got slapped a couple of times. Why is she so stubborn? An hour and a half later, the movie ended. I suggested watching something else, but Emma, citing the late hour, started getting ready to leave. It was indeed 2 a.m. At such a late hour, I couldn't let her go alone. I started getting ready to leave with her. At first she was against it, but then she agreed. As we were leaving the house, I forgot my pack of cigarettes, but I didn't go back. Emma lived on the other side of town. But since our town is small, a 30-minute walk, and here we are already standing at her entrance. We said goodbye. I kissed her on the cheek. She smiled and went home. I hurried home, desperate for a smoke. Damn it! I picked up the pace, trying not to think about the tape, but that wasn't enough. Because a few blocks from my house I froze. Ahead, about 30 meters away, under the lamppost stood a man. And it's 3 a.m. in our backwater town. I collected my thoughts and headed straight for the lamppost.
Can't find a light?
The voice was nothing like the voice from the tape. I felt relieved. I'm looking for one too, I replied and continued on, while the man continued to stand under the lamppost. Getting home, I took a shower and went to bed. I dreamed of the boy from the tape. He was crying and begging not to kill him. I woke up, feeling hungover and depressed. The time was 6 a.m. I had only slept for 2.5 hours. No wonder I felt so awful. Well, since that's the case, I'll go to school today. Thoughts of the tape faded away on their own. My mind refused to accept what I saw on the screen as truth. I had breakfast and headed to the first lesson. The day at school went poorly. I got a D in chemistry, which won't please my parents. I walked home slowly, examining the shop windows. I noticed a skateboard deck that caught my eye. I had been dreaming of one for a long time. When I reached home, I entered the lobby and checked our mailbox. A letter. From whom? There was absolutely nothing written on the envelope. Strange. I went up to my floor, entered the apartment, threw my backpack, and went into my room. I opened the envelope and started reading aloud. Hello, Robert. How did you like my film? Have you already watched the first cassette? If yes, then don't hesitate, insert the second one and enjoy the show. But I warn you not a word to anyone. A lump rose in my throat. I reread the letter again. I couldn't believe my eyes. How? When? Of course. I remembered yesterday the man by the lamppost, but what does it have to do with this? Thought stormed my head, my temples throbbed, my hands shook with fear. It seems I have no choice. Cassette number 2. I retrieved the packet of tapes from my hiding place, found the right one, and inserted it into the VCR. The screen showed a familiar school notebook with 12 sheets, the same handwriting as the first notebook. The student's name, class number, and school. The camera lens again showed the city surroundings. I couldn't say for sure if it was the same city, but the buildings were different. It was spring outside, early morning, and children were hurrying to school. The camera moved towards the smoking area, usually a place not far from the school but hidden from the teacher's eyes, often located behind the garages or around the corner of the school. The camera froze in the bushes behind the garage. After a couple of minutes, a pretty slim girl, about 17 years old, appeared in the frame, a blonde. She took out a cigarette and lit it. As soon as the girl turned her back, the camera started moving. The girl noticed a strange noise behind her, turned around, tried to call for help, but it was already too late. The recording cut off. The next frame. The girl is tied to a chair next to a dead boy. The boy's body had decomposed and resembled a desiccated mummy. The girl was breathing. Her eyes were covered, her mouth taped shut. A man appeared in the frame. He wore a mask. He had an athletic build, dressed in military uniform. He removed the tape and asked,
"Are you a virgin?"
The girl remained silent. Then the man untied the girl's eyes. The girl screamed hysterically, and I won't describe what I saw next. I'll quote only the words of that bastard.
"Girls, quit smoking. Think about your children." The recording ended there.
I don't know how much time passed before I regained the ability to move. I lit a cigarette. His cruelty no longer surprised me. I resigned myself to everything that was happening on the screen. I don't know.
Following in the diary is a gap of several days.
The May 16th, 1998. Forgive me, diary, but this is unbearable. How tired I am of looking at these atrocities. What does he want to achieve? Every day I had to watch one tape a day. Those were his conditions. Now I understand the meaning of the titles Day 1, Day 2, whatever they mean. Today it's time for the tape titled Day 6. I ponder what he will surprise me with this time. So, what could be there? I'm going crazy. I lit a cigarette. Today my friend should come to watch a movie, but I'll say that the VCR burned out. And we'll just go for a walk, and in the evening I'll watch the 6th tape. At 7 p.m. my friends arrived, Andrew, Emma, and a couple of others. Initially I said that the VCR burned out. At first they scolded me, but then it seemed like everything calmed down, and we went for a walk. We wandered around the city, went to a cafe, drank beer, and were already about to leave when Andrew called me over.
"Robert, come here for a word. We need to talk."
I approached.
"Robert, what's wrong with you? You're not yourself. Something happened?"
Andrew asked cautiously. No, everything's fine, just didn't sleep well. And things aren't working out with Emma, I replied.
"I don't believe you. Tell the truth."
He insisted. I didn't know what to say. To tell the truth now and make a fool of myself. In the end I said, "Come tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, I'll tell you and show you everything," I replied.
"Okay."
Andrew replied. We left the cafe and headed home. As usual, I walked Emma home and then went home myself. Again, various thoughts attacked my head. I walked as if in a daze. I didn't know if I was going home or just walking in circles until a sharp pain in my ankle brought me back to reality. I lifted my foot and discovered that I had torn the sole of my sneakers along with part of the heel. I hobbled home. Automatically, I retrieved the letter from the mailbox, went inside, treated the wound, read the letter, which mentioned something about the finish line. I threw away the letter and inserted the 6th cassette. I glanced at the clock. It was 12:30. Cassette number 6. Another notebook. The student's name, class number, and school. Stop. Oh no. I know him. He's the guy who disappeared without a trace 6 months ago. My God. This can't be happening. He lived in the neighboring town. We played for the same hockey club. It can't be. It can't. On the film, I see the outlines of the familiar city. These streets are familiar to me. I've been here before. It's autumn outside, midday. The camera captures our sports complex directly from the bushes opposite the entrance. Students from the hockey section are coming out. We're the last ones to come out, me and Tim. Oh God, oh God. No, Tim, please. We say goodbye at the entrance and go our separate ways. I briefly notice my reflection in the camera lens. I seem to have noticed it, but I turn and walk away, and the camera starts following Tim. This time I'm really scared because my friend is in the camera lens. He catches up with Tim in an abandoned alley where he went to pee. I don't want to talk about what that scumbag did to Tim. To fall asleep, I had to drink 200 grams of vodka. I can't believe this is happening to me. May 17th, 1998. I watched all the tapes. The 7th and final one this morning. It was empty. Andrew should come tonight. I'll show him everything, and we'll come up with something together. But for now, I'll go for a walk. I wandered around the city, visited Ellie, we talked. Having had enough walking, I returned home. Out of habit, I checked the mailbox. My legs weakened with horror. Instead of the usual letter, there was a cassette in the mailbox. I had no idea how it got there. The cassette had the inscription Day 7. I inserted the cassette and was horrified. There was no notebook. Instead, my passport photo filled the entire screen. I swallowed the lump in my throat. The streets of our city appeared. The next frame, me hugging Emma, then me sitting in a bar, and finally me leaving the entrance of my house for today's walk. Out of fear, I gathered all the tapes into a pile and burned them right in the kitchen. I crushed the remnants and flushed them down the toilet. I'll hide the diary here, where I kept the tapes and cigarettes, under the wooden floor, which I dismantled specifically for this purpose. There's a knock on the door. Probably Andrew. Now we'll come up with something together.
This is the last entry in the diary. I found it in one of the rooms when I was replacing the old floors. Nothing is known about the continuation of the story. Something about a family living, and then they all disappeared together.